We're back in our St. Louis studio for This Week in Missouri Politics with one of the rising stars, not only in Democratic politics, but all the state, the minority leader of the Missouri House of Representatives, Quade. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Let's start off with something. So it was about maybe 2 or 3 months from now last year, you came out and you were the first person to sound the alarm that says, hey, the current Director of Revenue, Joe Walters, has to go. Maybe the first people that said that might be on this stage right now. Before long, every Republican that met a payroll in the state was agreeing with you and repeating pretty much what you'd said from the beginning. You also sounded an alarm about Medicaid. There were people falling off Medicaid faster than they should have been earlier this year, and now there's committees and investigating it. It's got to feel a little bit good as a minority leader to have the majority party now following your lead.
Well, I would say there's nothing feeling good about what's going on with Medicaid in Missouri right now. We're seeing just about 127,000 people who have been removed from the rolls in the past 19 months, 100,000 of them being children. And a lot of the phone calls that I'm receiving, the conversations I'm having on the ground with healthcare providers, these are families who do qualify based on their economic status and should be enrolled, and they're not. And so we're seeing a lot of folks in panic right now.
So you seem to know something other people didn't about revenue last year. This year, is there something you could tell us as to why you think, if you just had to guess, I'm not saying that you would know, if you had to guess as to why that drop-off is occurring, what is the reason for that?
Well, I don't believe that there's one reason. There's multiple reasons. The economy is better for some, so there are some folks who simply don't qualify. You'll hear a lot from the other side that the ACA no longer requires health care coverage, so some people are just not choosing to have health care. I will counter that we're talking about a demographic of people who, if
I thought it forced you to have health care coverage.
That rule changed. So now there's that option. So that's some of it. But the biggest thing that I am hearing is that folks simply did not receive the paperwork that says, hey, you need to turn this stuff back in to prove that you qualify. In full transparency, for many years, the state of Missouri has not been reconfirming that folks should be on Medicaid based on their income and eligibility levels. So the state has started to fix that.
Just so I can understand this.
Yes.
So if you were in a spot in your life where you needed help and you were on Medicaid, then let's say you got a better job and things turned around for you, you got married and you didn't qualify anymore, you were still using Medicaid benefits as though back when you were having a harder time.
Potentially. So the state was not reconfirming that folks actually needed to stay on it. And so about a year ago, a little over a year ago, we started to comply with the federal regulations on that, which is a good thing. But what we're seeing is that a lot of folks they were supposed to receive this letter that says, hey, turn back in your paperwork within 10 days. A lot of folks are saying that they never received it. They are just receiving a piece of paper that says that you've been kicked off, or they're going into the emergency room and that's where they're finding out that they don't have health care coverage anymore. And when I talk to the healthcare providers, hospitals, the federal qualified health clinics, that's what they're saying they're seeing, that folks are just walking in and not knowing that they have coverage anymore. And so, it's a combination of a lot of things. There are some people who maybe just simply didn't turn their paperwork back in. But I am talking to folks who have, some children, for instance, who have lots of medical needs, whose parents, this is their full-time job, who are in the doctor's office multiple days a week, who have social workers, who have full teams of healthcare professionals around them that didn't get their paperwork turned back in. These are not people who just wouldn't turn the paperwork back in or not pay attention to that. They have full teams of people working with them. So they're the ones who are telling me that they never received the request from the state to turn that in.
So do you think you'll, going into session, we see that actually addressed and followed up?
I hope so. Every month it's been about 10,000 people. This last month it was a little over 8,000. We're not seeing much of a decline. Even the department is saying that we expect to see a lift in those numbers of people who no longer have coverage because kids are going back to school, going to the doctor, so they're finding out. So I don't know when these numbers are going to slow down, if and when they do. I hope that this conversation continues. We have a lot of work to do to work on this program.
So that tells me you might be someone that doesn't let that conversation stop.
I definitely won't. As long as I am getting calls from Missourians saying we need help, and I'm getting these very unfortunate situations and very sad stories of families in need who have dire healthcare situations, chemo patients not being able to get chemotherapy, and this is not only a catastrophic problem for these people, we're going to see potential higher healthcare costs down the line. You know, if you've got somebody who's in chemo who can't get their treatment and has to stop and restart that whole program again, that could potentially cost us more money down the line because of higher health needs. So this is not just a humanitarian issue that I'm looking at it from that side, it's also a financial issue.
So let's talk about a special session. You're heading back to work in 2 weeks, not just for a veto session that would be probably pretty uneventful, but for a special session. What if you trade in 2 cars, you don't get credit for? Is that what the problem is? A court decision kind of threw a monkey wrench in some things?
Yeah, it's the Supreme Court came down and said this is something about turning in and getting tax credits, and the governor disagrees with it and deems it an emergency. We're being told that this ruling affects maybe 3,000 people, and so yeah, that's what he's calling us back for.
Yeah, but if you're having to write that check to the Department of Revenue for more than you probably aren't to, that probably those 3,000 people probably pretty sore.
I'm sure that it is very important to those 3,000 people, and probably something that we should address. I do believe that we could wait till January to have this conversation. As I've said before, if the governor wants to call us back, it should be something that is much more of an emergency, like these kids losing their health care.
Let's talk about a bill you were very outspoken on. That was the abortion law. There was some pretty sweeping pro-life legislation the governor signed into law. There was a pretty emotional debate in the House the day that it moved through the House. You've been very outspoken in your opposition to that. Where it stands now, you have some pretty unlikely allies in this fight. David Humphreys, one of the most prolific Republican donors in the history of the party in the state of Missouri, has come out and said he would support an initiative petition against this. Where do things stand now? There's probably got to be some court action that begins, right? There
is court action happening, not only on the bill, but also the Secretary of State's not allowing the initiative petition to go through in a timely manner. So we've already seen some court proceedings around this. Yeah, so where it stands now, you know, it becomes law on August 28th, and that's where it is. ACLU has filed lawsuits, so I imagine it will take some time before it takes effect because of the court proceedings if it is allowed to take effect. But in terms of the legislature and the policy side of it, it has been done, and I hope that we can have a discussion at some point to undo it.
Let's talk about politics now. You're the minority leader of, 45, 46? Where are you at right now?
We've had a few people resign, so we're sitting at 44.
But a few of those seats,
yes,
probably pick back up.
Very safe Democratic seats, yeah. So we should be sitting around 47.
So how do you, in the state of Missouri where Donald Trump won by 19, where you've seen election after election, I've heard this, suburban women are going to vote Democrat this time, or union members are going to vote Democrat this time, because of the majority, the money, the problems of being in such a small caucus, it seems to never happen. What needs to happen for Democrats to move those numbers? I'm sure a majority would be, probably overly aggressive, but how do you turn that around and start seeing real gains each cycle?
Yeah, well, for me, I'm looking at this from 2 ways. One, we as a party really need to focus on infrastructure building, and that's something that I believe that we have lacked for some time. It took a while for the Republicans to take back the state in the numbers that they have. It's going to take us a little while to get out of it from the super minority perspective. So I am spending a lot of time on investing in infrastructure, and that's not just dollars but time for staffing, training folks, recruiting the right kind of candidate. I can tell you as a Democrat from Springfield, my folks, it's not about D or R as much as me as an individual and what I've done for my community and what I hope for the area that I live in and for the state. And so I have a lot of Republicans who vote for me. They may not agree with me on all my issues, but they trust me and I'm authentic with them and we have a relationship. So a big piece of that is finding the right person who lives in the area, who's from there. Their kids play basketball together. So that's a big piece of it for us. But I will also say that, the governor and the extremism that's been going on in Jefferson City is making the conversation a little bit easier for us. As you said with the abortion bill, we've got Republicans who are not feeling like what's happening in Jefferson City is, and nationally, to be honest with you, is in line with moderate Missouri views. And so, we do have folks who are looking to find a place. What the Republican Party has kind of left them. The Democratic Party is not their home, but they're looking for candidates that they can invest in. And frankly, I believe that our governor candidate is one of them, and that's only going to help me grow my numbers.
The traditional battlegrounds were always, you go to Platte County and Clay County, Eastern Jackson County, the Boot Hill, South County, St. Louis, Jefferson County. It was kind of where you'd fight these legislative fights, maybe one or two other places, but those are the main spots. If you have candidates that are in favor of some gun control and maybe pro-choice, it seems to be very hard to win. When Democrats did hold those seats, it was generally with people that were relatively pro-gun and pretty pro-life. Is there a way to win those seats, or does the battleground change to like West County St. Louis, where maybe those views on social issues are a little different?
I think it's a combination of both. The battlegrounds have definitely changed over time. I would even say that there are some places in Springfield, Columbia now that we're looking at that that are potential pickup seats. But I do fundamentally believe that a Democrat can win in places like that, even if they disagree on those issues. You know me. I grew up in Webster County. I want to see some reforms around guns, but I am also someone who grew up eating the food that my dad killed. So there are a lot of Democrats who find that middle ground, and we've even heard the governor discuss on guns in particular that he's in favor of extended bigger background checks and even the red flag laws that Democrats have been talking about for some time. So
I found that interesting.
I did too, and but he comes from a law enforcement background. As you well know, the changes that have happened in Missouri, the law enforcement professionals came out against a lot of the changes that we've seen in the past 5-10 years, for loosening the gun laws in Missouri. So there are conversations to be had, and I do think, again, we can find some of that middle. But I will tell you that a lot of voters that I've had interactions with is not necessarily that we agree 100%, but if we're honest and authentic with them and upfront with what we believe and have that conversation instead of trying to lie about it like a lot of politicians do, folks are more open to having that dialogue and trusting us with their votes.
So last question, you mentioned Nicole Galloway running for governor, probably the best candidate the Democrats could have put up. She's a statewide elected official. Tell us why Nicole Galloway can beat Mike Parson. Nicole
can beat Governor Parson for a lot of reasons. I mean, she's new, she is exciting, but I will say fundamentally she has done an amazing job as auditor, holding both sides of the political parties accountable. And she has dug in, and she's not scared to say the things that normal elected officials are scared to say. She will buck the traditional establishment, lobbyist corps, the dirty inside government that people look at. Nicole's not part of that. She is new to being an elected official, so she's not tied to anybody. She doesn't owe anyone anything. But I think most importantly, she is so very qualified to be our governor. She is smart, and everything that she has put her teeth into, she has really given it her all. And I know that she wouldn't be running for the seat unless she believed that she could do it.
It's going to be an interesting race because I think it's very hard to put the old, dark, shadowy TV ad about Mike Parson. That's just not who he is. And nor is it Nicole Galloway. He's a very competent, intelligent person who's not, I'm sure they'll run the commercial, but I think it's a little hard to say Nicole Galloway is this evil, shadowy figure. It might be a time where they actually talk about issues that affect the state.
Wouldn't that be something?
It probably won't happen.
It probably won't, but I hope it does. You'll hear Nicole say that, Governor Parson's a nice guy. I mean, nobody disagrees with that. But a nice guy is not necessarily the policy issues that we need to be focusing on in Missouri. There are a lot of things that folks are concerned about, the direction that the state is headed. And I think Nicole's the person to really pull us out and bring some balance back to Missouri.
We hope as this campaign unfolds, as interesting we hope campaign unfolds, you'll come back and talk about us here on This Week in Missouri Politics.
Would absolutely love to.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll be right back with our Opinion Maker panel. Last week in the second segment, we had Blake Hurst and Mike Parson. This week we're going to have 4 up-and-coming members of the Democratic caucus in the House of Representatives. It's going to be fun. But first, I want you to go to showmissouri.com. We were at the State Fair last week. We had to sit down with the Director of Missouri Department of Agriculture, Chris Chan, talk about her life, how she became director, and what she does not only with the State Fair, but with the Department of Agriculture. We'll be right back after this.
All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, the heart of Missouri.
At Ameren, Missouri, we know what light can do. It draws people together and chases monsters away. And if you shine it in the right direction, it will light the path for the next generation, showing them what their tomorrow could look like, and spotlighting the possibilities that lay in front of them. Investing in our community by lighting the way forward. That's energy at work. Ameren, Missouri.
Welcome back to This Week in Missouri Politics Opinion Maker Panel time. If you watched last week, you got to see our Opinion Maker panel with Blake Hurst and Mike Parsons. So this week we have 4 up-and-coming Democratic House members. Representative Alan Green running for the state Senate, is that correct?
Absolutely.
Welcome back to the show.
Thank
For
you.
the first time, Representative Keri Ingle from Jackson County. Welcome back, and congratulations on your win as the minority whip, is that right?
Yes, it is. Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us. Representative Ashley Manlove Bland Manlove?
Bland Manlove.
Bland Manlove, welcome back to the show.
No, right. Thank you.
And Representative Judy Morgan from Jackson County.
That's
Thank you
right.
very much for joining us here.
welcome.
Let's talk about the first thing. Your minority leader was one of the first people I heard to say, hey, there's a Medicaid problem here.
Yes.
People are falling off at numbers that don't make sense. This doesn't add up. She was on earlier in the show, kind of broke down what she thought the problem was. You're definitely a policy person. You've been in the legislature for a while. What do you think when they finally get to the root of this problem? Why are so many people falling off Medicaid?
Sure. Well, we had about 100,000 kids fall off Medicaid. I think it's 120,000 total people, but 100,000 kids, 5 times the national average. So we know it's not the economy, because ours is so much higher, and our economy, personal income, is not even keeping up with the national personal income. I think it has to do with the new system that has been instituted. The decline started when that new system, the new computer system, was put in place. And so what's happening is the old system used to be able to pick up renewals automatically based on SNAP or other information. This system does not. People are basically being sent letters, but a lot of times they have a very short period to respond in terms of the renewal, or they may not ever get the letter. I think of the 100,000 that were sent out, 20,000 were undeliverable. So you've got just this big, massive problem with people not knowing they're being kicked off. They don't find out until they get to their doctor's offices. These are kids. I read of one case from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch where this child had ringworm. His mom took him to the doctor, found out he was kicked off. Doctor wouldn't serve him. She spent a couple of weeks calling to try to get him back on. Finally got this long form delivered to her, got it turned in. She finally had to go to Eastern Missouri of legal aid. She was on the St. Louis side. They helped her get back on. In the meantime, her kid was out of school for a whole month.
Wow.
Because he could not, they couldn't let him back into school because he had ringworm. So these are the things that are happening because I think the system is broken. And then I think the other thing that's a problem is, again, when people find out they're off and they try to renew again, and they're still eligible, there's no problem with their eligibility, it's taken them a long time to get back on. So I think those are the problems.
You've served in government a long time. Usually these problems may have one real source, but a lot of times it could be a multiple of things.
Yeah.
The economy's better, that's got to help, right? There's some new software that has been questioned.
Absolutely.
There's the fact that maybe the previous administrations did not check that closely to see if folks didn't need Medicaid anymore. And so when all those maybe storm hits, when they really get down the bottom of this, what is going to be what's credited as being the reason for this?
Wow, that's a good question right there. Because, of course, we are looking at automation in all the departments. That's something that came up committee last year. But falling through the cracks, I was reading some reports related to what she just stated right there, and there's a lot of individuals falling through the cracks, which is something in the state we have to address. And even though we're talking about our computer systems, we can't use that as an excuse, I'll be honest, because so many times we're talking about families, and these are the core values of what we are, so all of us are sitting up here on. And so we have to take a deeper look at that. Automation is a wonderful thing, don't get me wrong, but the personal touch to making sure that paperwork is done is key. It's very key.
Representative Blair Manlove, there's one thing I've noticed your short time in the legislature, is you have a lot of empathy for people.
Yeah.
You're somebody that I've seen reach out to folks that are hurting. This is the stories like that are ones that your heart goes out to. People can feel a little callous about Medicaid, but when you hear a story like that, that touches your heart.
It has to, and the sad part is that it's children who are being affected
Absolutely.
the hardest. And with the rampant gun violence that we have between most of our major cities, Kansas City and St. Louis and Springfield specifically, to possibly maybe have your child, a victim of gun violence and then go to the hospital and find out you don't have any Medicaid, that would be horrifying.
Right.
Horrifying, at least. I really hope, whether it's the algorithms or whether it's just carelessness, I really hope this situation resolves itself quickly without too much undue damage and trauma to our children.
I remember it was Crystal Quade was one of the first ones that said, hey, there's a problem at Revenue. Before everybody agreed with her, she's the one saying there's a problem. She's one of the first that said there's a problem here. When you get down to solve it, is there a way they can do some sort of hotline if you've been kicked off, maybe give you special attention? Or there are people that clearly have been removed that needed to be. And there's clearly some that probably didn't.
Right, absolutely. The Medicaid process is incredibly complicated. I've worked as a social worker my entire career and helped people doing the initial application process, which is lengthy, it's arduous, it's very difficult to do. And so when you talk about people who have a lot of barriers in their lives, you know, whether it's transportation, whether it's access to the internet, all of these different complications, we're talking about people who are working often multiple jobs. And it's very difficult for them to go to a government agency, even one time, let alone multiple times during work hours. And so the easier we can make it, the more streamlined we can make it to help these people, because we're talking about, 6,100 children, over 6,000 children were kicked off in July.
Well, if you're on public assistance, you probably, by definition, have some things in your life that are struggles.
Right.
And maybe things aren't as easy as if you're living in Ladue or Lee Summit or somewhere. There's a different life you're leading. Maybe those things compound the problem.
But there are, I don't want to, there are people on Medicaid in Lee Summit and Ladue. This is something that affects everyone. Although this state is, seems to be doing better economically, wages are low. People are having to work multiple jobs, and there's a struggle across all walks of life and throughout the entire state. Working in Jackson County, I've worked with people who do have a lot of means, who live a mile or two away from people that are in abject poverty, and so the lines aren't as thick as you would think they are.
Let's talk about special session, Representative Green. So right now, the Supreme Court got involved, and if you trade in two cars and buy one, you can't take both of them off your sales tax. Is that pretty much what's going on?
Yes.
It's going to be controversial?
Well, just think about it. They traded in two, and then they came back later and said, we want to trade in two more. And the deal was already done, but they're saying, okay, we came back to the table because we want to reduce that payment before we make the payment. And I thought about that. I said, okay, mathematically it sounds good, but our policy doesn't say that they can. But Revenue said that they could, and so that caused controversy in itself, saying, wait a minute. When Revenue now gets involved and said that you can, and then it went all the way to the appeals court, Supreme Court, and you're saying, wait a minute, everyone, just think about it, everyone would start using that particular process. But to me, it's ridiculous.
You'd have to have 4 cars, right?
and trading in 4 cars because you just want to reduce the cost on it. But for a special session, to me, it doesn't make any sense.
Is this going to be controversial?
I don't know if it's going to be controversial, but it only covers 3,000 people in the whole state, according to the governor even. So we're talking about 3,000 people that we're having a special session for, and yet we've just been talking about an issue kicking 100,000 kids off of Medicaid and another 20,000 adults off Medicaid. That deserves a special session. We talked about the gun violence. My area has been extremely hard hit by the property tax reassessment. Some of my constituents have been telling me, can't you have a special session for that, because those bills are due December 31st, and if we wait till January.
That would be interesting.
So, we've got other.
But if you're one of those folks that are writing that check and you are trading it in, that probably matters to you, right?
There is always an underlying seam of special interest, and it's unfortunate that we're going to waste even more tax dollars, not only for these ridiculous tax credits, but also the tax dollars that are going to be spent to have us sitting in that chamber for additional days. Yes, it's on the back of veto session, but I think we said about $50,000.
$23,000 a day is what it costs taxpayers in this state.
Let me ask you, while we have time, right now Democrats occupy about 4 dozen seats of those seats in that legislature. You're someone that actually flipped a seat. It was held by Representative Gary Cross, a Republican. Now it's held by you. How did Democrats change that dynamic? I've heard for so many cycles, this is the time Democrats are going to pick up here, here, and here. and it just hasn't happened. What needs to happen for more people to do what you did and flip seats?
I think that we have to find people that are already invested in their communities, that already are hopefully representing what that community aspires to be. I think that that's pivotal. I think that we've got to find candidates that are willing to really, really do the work, and really relate to what their communities are going through every day. That they're able to empathize with the struggles that they're going through, because they're going through them too. Whether it's roads that need repairing, schools that need better funding, factories that are closing around them, whatever the problem may be, we've got to offer a more realistic or a better solution to the problems. And we've got to be able to find candidates that are able to really articulate both what the problem is and what they see the solution might be.
You're very familiar with St. Louis County.
Yes.
St. Louis County is a place that has Republicans and Democrats
Yes.
elected. How do you go to those seats that have Republicans? Is it the individual candidates? Is it the national party? How do you distance yourself from that? How do you win those seats?
Well, I always feel all politics is local, and especially when we're talking about areas that swing, like South County and St. Louis County swings, that's a swing area. West County, even though it's majority actually Republican, but when we're talking about besides the presidential, even the county executive race, they don't come out. North County comes out strong, South County comes out strong, West County doesn't come out very strong in our particular area right here. So when you're looking at the getting people involved right here is, we need to start going back to our schools, especially schools of political science, and taking a look at those youngsters and bring them along. But we also need to look at community activists and other individuals that's interested in politics. We're missing the boat in a lot of different areas because it's so many times it's strategic, and who wants to go to Jefferson City?
It is a challenge. How do you, give me 10 seconds. How do you go find people that can flip seats?
People have to realize that they are good enough.
Right.
People have to realize that they are. If you're a subject matter expert, you're good enough.
Absolutely.
Whatever that subject might be, whether it's education or health, or for me, my background is in accounting, but also served in the military. So if you're a subject matter expert, come out. Your voice is needed.
We should start on this topic. That's great. But who won the week?
Who won the week? Powell Gardens and the 141 residents who live around there.
Yes, local control.
Yes, local control, that's right. There was a Valley Oak Steak Company that had 900 cattle that wanted to expand it to 6,999, just one below what they would need for an odor plan. The residents were complaining that the stench and the flies were horrible. They couldn't enjoy going outside, so they filed suit. And this week, Valley Oak Steak is leaving.
Who won the week?
Keri Ingle,
Oh,
Yeah.
Minority Whip.
Yep. Who won the week?
Our new assistant leader, Tommy Pearson.
Absolutely. Who won the week?
Actually, St. Louis City and the region, we get a new soccer team.
Congratulations.
Absolutely.
I got to spend a little time this week down in Springfield, and you can't help but be brought in when you go to Springfield by Cliff Smart, Missouri State University. So many good things going down there, and I think a lot of it has to do with the magnetism of the president, Cliff. So I'm going to say Cliff Smart won the week. Hope you'll win the week, not next week, but in 2 weeks. We're off Labor Day weekend. See you in 2 weeks on This Week in Missouri Politics.
This Week in Missouri Politics, sponsored by the Missouri Association of Career Fire Protection Districts, SPIRE, and Sterling Bank.